Menomonie all the way north to Rice Lake. I've also been an early adopter of cover crops in the area, my very first efforts being using red clover underneath the winter wheat to produce nitrogen as a legume for the following corn crop. It's important to understand, I think from a historical perspective, the changes that have occurred in our landscape if we're to adequately address the challenges that we have today in the protection of our ground and surface waters. Since the landscape was first cut over by the logging industries of yesteryear and the dairy industry took a hold in Wisconsin, there has been continual change in land use. The dairy industry itself has been under siege recently by the economic factors that have forced the smaller and less efficient to step aside. Where once pasture and hay crops flourished, and they were the mainstay, now there are many, many row crops. These changes have required us as producers, in order to be successful, in order to produce in a profitable way, to either change or to face similar demise. So with that background, on the acreage I am farming, we have recognized that our number one goal is to be sustainable. Sustainable to me means that we can operate in such a way so that future generations do not face any more complicated decisions than we have today. They have the same opportunities that we have today to provide for their families and to raise their families in a way that doesn't take away from those future generations' opportunities. We've recognized the moral responsibility that our most valuable resource is the landscape, the soil, and the water. And we want to leave that in a better position when we started with it than when we pass it on. I applaud efforts to make significant progress in these areas. I also implore all stakeholders to recognize that farmers share proportionally in the responsibility to do better. And in that, I am a spokesperson for conservation agriculture. I welcome the support that our government can give to us, and I promise you that as a leader in that general area, that those dollars be put to good use without waste. It's for that reason that I was named the American Soybean Association's Conservation Legacy Award winner in 2017 on a national level. There were three other recipients from different geographies, and for no reason that I can name, I was named the national winner, and since that time I've had time to speak across the country and across Wisconsin on behalf of the things that we're doing on our farm and the things that seem to have made a difference for us in our sustainability efforts. Our farmer-led watershed group has been hard at work promoting cover crops, reduced tillage, crop rotation, low disturbance manure application, and a host of other proven strategies to our neighbors so that improved soil structure and soil quality from those efforts allow that soil to absorb the rains that fall and reduce the runoff that carry both soil particles and nutrients into our waterways, our streams, and our rivers. We will continue these efforts by continuing education and encouragement to a listening audience. Our non-farm neighbors and rural residents need also to be involved. Things like natural buffer areas along the sides of water bodies, avoiding over-fertilization of lawns, stopping the burning of leaves in gutters and lawn areas, maintenance of septic systems, all of these can have a positive influence on the waters we seek to protect. On my farm, we have taken the stance that we will do what we can to reduce our negative impact, and we will improve the positive impact that sound practices can deliver. It is far less costly to keep the phosphorus from reaching the waterways than it is to remove them once they've gotten there. I welcome efforts to reward the measurable improvements of those who can make a difference in these metrics. Our crops are nearly 100% no-till. Our fertility program recognizes the variability in the soil capacity and the yield potential. And all of our nutrients are applied using a combination of nutrient removal and yield potential basis and variable rate application. That is to say that where our soils are able to yield higher, we then apply nutrients based on those removal rates, but we also measure the soil fertility levels so that we're not building our soil fertility levels to a higher level than is necessary to maintain economic production. Our farm utilizes also an integrated pest management strategy to manage diseases and insects. Only the targeted pests are ever treated for control of crop destroying potential. We clearly understand and embrace the use of a growing crop at every opportunity to build a robust variety of microorganisms and soil life that in turn give resiliency to the soil and improve our soil structure to make it more resistant to erosion. Those soil microbes, the vast plethora of soil life, serve to recycle nutrients and hold them for subsequent crops. All those micronutrients provide a glue that holds the soil particles together to make them resistant to the impacts of raindrops that can then dislodge those soil particles. And when those soil particles move across the soil, they take with them the nutrients, and that's how the nutrients leave the land in most cases. The ongoing effort to do a better job in all these areas will undoubtedly have an impact on the future of surface and groundwater. This in turn will make for a better world in which to raise our children and grandchildren. My dream is that future generations will look back someday at my efforts, and it will motivate them and their children to continue the effort to make the earth their partner for the benefit of all who call her home. So with that, I thank you, and if you have a few questions.
Hello, I'm Jeff Lake. I'm a farmer.
Thank you.
Jeff Lake?
I'm the fifth generation of the family farm, an active member of a farmer-led Hay River watershed group. We also do all kinds of things with cover crops and just like the same thing Andy does. My family started with the dairy, and now we run a cash crop operation: corn, grain, alfalfa for like a small beef herd that we have. The Lake family has always been had a lot of passion for protecting the water sources that we have. The Hay River runs through quite a bit of our land that we own. Just for instance, 20 years ago we built some stream barbs on the river just to stop the riverbank erosion. And just yesterday we found out that for the second year in a row we're the top three finalists for the Aldo Leopold Conservation Award on our farm, sponsored by the Farm Bureau. And as a crop farmer, here's a few things that we do on our farm to protect the water supplies and the soil health on our farm. We do no-till planting. We plant cover crops. We do soil tests just to see what the nutrients are in the ground. We have been putting buffer strips next to streams way before, for many, many years. This year is actually the first year that we'll actually get paid for doing some of that through like prep programs, which I feel is very, very important. Doing grass waterways on our fields, waterways where the water can run off and got filters there. We split apply fertilizer to keep our nutrients as our crops need them. So as like if you test your soil and you get a CEC thing, so a CEC count, that just tells you how much nutrients your soil can hold at a certain amount of rainfall. It'll actually hold the pounds of fertilizer and all that sort of stuff. We also work with UW Discovery Farms as far as a nutrient or nitrogen efficiency, as far as how much fertilizer we put on. It gives us a good gauge on what our practices are, whether we're efficient, non-efficient, and the tests are very, very good. We're doing a good job. We work with Pheasants Forever as far as variable rate seeding and taking some of our certain fields out of production, say like green areas is where we're profitable, red areas are where we're not profitable. So we'll look at them and we'll say why are we not profitable on them, and then we'll either put them in the set aside or like a pheasant habitat or something like that. Doing a lot of things there. One of the other things with like the variable rate planting is just on our farm, we save probably $10,000-$12,000 just on where your land is not fit for really row crops. You lessen the population of your corn, so you spread it out. So then your fertilizer we put on less fertilizer on them areas also. So it just works out better that way. Another thing that we've been doing is hosting a field day for farmers and non-farmers. So that way we can kind of educate both farmers on what we are doing and the non-farmers of what we're doing, and as far as benefits to what we are doing, just kind of an educational thing for farmers and non-farmers. Just this last month we had 90-some people there, about half and half of non-farmers versus farmers. So that's one thing. But like I say, some of this, like Andy was saying, but some of this is not easy or affordable process for many of us these days. And we need to address the ways that we can help promote successful transition to conservation practices on a whole. And that would include like keeping farmer-led watershed groups and lake grants funded, if we can. Create markets with a higher premium on our crop that for people that are using conservation practices. I think that would be kind of a good idea where more people would buy into it, where we'd get paid for what we do. Increasing incentives for like buffer strips through like prep programs or CRP, where like just the buffer strips, it's actually small acres, but huge results, where if you have runoff and getting next to rivers or anything like that, some people do that. And here's another one that kind of a neat idea is possibly deregulating some of the things that have worked. Like I was saying, 20 years ago we put in some stream barbs, where they're just rock. All they are is a rock dam basically that just pushes the current over. And that's something that's really not addressed here a lot. That the river actually does do a lot of erosion all itself. You know, you look at like sandbanks, and at this particular one that we did 20 years ago, it was taking 12 feet a year just of topsoil. At first there was trees and stuff for our field. Now it took back then it took the trees and it started coming into the field, so we just put rock strips in there. Very low cost, just use field stones, put them out there. And to this day, 20 years later, it's still working great. There's no erosion. So if we can just lessen the cost of doing that. Another thing that I thought that they're trying down in Illinois or Iowa, reading some of the stuff, is like digging out some of the oxbows or old sloughs that I call them, where I feel that they're just natural sediment ponds. So if we could dig them out, up in our river systems, re-spread that on the land, because like when the rivers flood over, all the leaves and all that stuff gets flushed into that. So all the nutrients are just sitting there, and I feel that they're full. They used to be pretty clean. You just dig down just a little bit, usually about a foot, 2 foot, and it turns right into nice clean sand again. So I just feel that some of that stuff could get cleaned out. Another concern is protecting our lakes and streams is just the beginning of what I feel needs to be addressed. What we need to really think about is where we start protecting our groundwater. I, as a farmer, we can drink our water on our farm, and I take a lot of pride in that. And we just need to keep doing what we can. So, any other questions?
Thank you very much. Nicole?
Retired hydrologist, formerly with the U.S. Geological Survey, and I would like to introduce you to the map which shows recharge rates to the aquifer in Dunn County. Probably the only map of this type in Wisconsin, although Chippewa Falls now is currently preparing a similar map. All counties should have such a map. The percolation rates of 91 soil types were classified from excellent to poor. Without this map, we can only talk about groundwater problems, but can never do anything to protect groundwater. With this map, 2 townships passed ordinances protecting high recharge areas to the aquifer and protecting groundwater quality by regulating land uses. Using the recharge map, I located 400 septic land spreading sites and found 150 sites did not meet DNR percolation standard, which requires that the percolation rate be less than 6 inches per hour. I contacted the DNR, the governor, all state legislators about the problem. DNR said they were working the problem. My recommendation was to abandon septic land spreading. Michigan and Florida have already banned septic land spreading. Groundwater in the Chippewa Valley, including St. Croix and Pierce counties, is very contaminated and is getting worse from all septic systems being established in housing developments. High nitrates are a red flag telling us that the well water is contaminated. Nitrates come from manure, fertilizer, and septic systems. In housing developments where each house has a well and a septic system, people may be drinking their neighbor's septic water. Water from septic drain fields contain pharmaceuticals, nitrates, viruses, and organic chemicals from cleaners. High nitrate can cause colorectal cancer and thyroid dysfunction. Housing developments may have 60% of the recharge to the aquifer coming from septic drain field water. A Chippewa County study in 2016 sampled 60 wells that had nitrate ranging from 2 to 32 milligrams per liter. Agriculture and septic were found in 15 wells, agriculture in 13 wells, septic in 19 wells, and 13 wells had neither. New housing developments continue to be established, and the new homeowners will have no idea that in 5 to 10 years they will be drinking their neighbor's drain field septic water. I would recommend a pilot study in Menomonie area, which is surrounded by housing developments, to determine the nitrate level in well water in housing developments that are closely together, housing developments that have both wells and septic systems. If it is determined that the wells in densely populated areas do have high nitrate, then good drinking water needs to be provided by the city of Menomonie, or rural water systems need to be established. This is a statewide health problem. Something needs to be done now. For 30 years, I have watched counties in the Chippewa Valley prepare a 5-year report which states that there is a groundwater contamination. And for 30 years, towns, counties, and the state have done nothing towards fixing the nitrate groundwater problem except to do some groundwater studies which end up on the shelves. I do recommend the groundwater studies, but unfortunately we don't take the study and use them to pass ordinance to protect the groundwater. Thank you very much.
Kim DeBree?
Good, thank you. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you coming. I'm here today to share my experience living a mile and a half from a CAFO for 15 plus years near Emerald, Wisconsin in St. Croix County, which was a rural residential zoned area with 90 families within 2 miles of the facility. Despite assurances from the DNR that everything would be okay with the nutrient management plan, everything was not okay many years later. Emerald Town Hall sits right across the road from Emerald Sky Dairy. The town hall has seen its nitrates rise from about 6.9 parts per million in 2007 to over 33 in 2018. Other town halls in St. Croix County also have "Don't drink the water" signs posted because of either nitrates or E. coli contamination. Residential neighbors of this CAFO have also watched their nitrates rise significantly of late. One neighbor dug a new well just a little over a year ago, 200 feet deep. The nitrates were still at 17. He then had to actually install a reverse osmosis system in order to sell his property. And the new homeowner has said that they still don't drink the water because she has young kids. She doesn't want to risk it. In 2017, it took an anonymous tip to discover a massive manure spill at Emerald Sky Dairy, and that resulted in the largest cleanup of its kind, we believe, in state history. 3,455 tons of manure solids in wetlands around the facility. It also contaminated a stormwater pond. 8 million gallons of stormwater pond needed to be spread on area fields. And that was all done in 2017. E. coli readings taken by the DNR in that stormwater pond and just downstream showed that the spill contained E. coli that was 8 to 10 times higher than when a DNR closes a beach. So when a cluster of homes just downstream from that spill found E. coli in their drinking water a couple weeks later, no advanced testing was done by the DNR to verify the source. The neighbors were the ones who notified each other of the contamination. You know, and if this was a municipal water system, it'd be hair on fire time if there was E. coli in the water, right? There'd be notifications going out, there would be testing to find out where it came from. We don't know where this came from. Coincidentally, it looks like it was from the spill cleanup, but we don't know. Could have been somebody's septic system, could have been a lot of things. But we'll never know, because the testing wasn't done. And what really concerned us is that there was a woman, when my neighbor was pregnant at the time, I had another neighbor receiving cancer treatments. Lots of kids and elderly live in the area. Again, 90 families live within 2 miles. And then to add insult to injury, the penalty for the spill to this producer was only $80,000. And per the civil complaint filed by the Wisconsin Department of Justice in May, any one of those assessed penalties could have carried a $10,000 a day fine. As this spill went unreported for nearly 100 days, the penalty should have been over $1 million. But I guess that's what a good Madison lawyer can get for you. Your penalty is reduced by 95%. For the rest of us, though, we don't have any legal recourse. Maybe it's because of right to farm laws, maybe it's because of a lack of investigation as to where the source of the spill came, source of the contamination in the wells really came from, various reasons. So I'm here today to advocate for all the other farm kids such as myself. We returned to the country seeking that rural way of life that we loved as a kid. And we want to give it to our children and our grandchildren. We're used to country smells, tractors on the roads, excitement in the air at harvest time. That's the life we love. However, when an industrial producer moves in next door, those sights, smells, and sounds can be amplified 1,000-fold and are a lot less tolerable. So you've heard many asks today. I would agree with many of them. Mandatory well testing of town halls, I think, would be a good place to start. I think it would give you a snapshot right away of your water quality statewide. Require them to report it to Stevens Point. Because a lot of the homeowners in our area, they don't take their well water test to Stevens Point. They don't want any public record that their water is contaminated. They take it to Colfax and they sit on it. So when you see the data on the numbers up there, I have to wonder how legitimate those are, because it's probably not inclusive of all the testing that's really being done. I also would advocate for requiring that the nutrient management plan contracts actually be a written agreement with the landowner, not the land renter. We've had problems with that in Emerald, where the land renter gives the industrial producer permission to spread on the land, and the landowner is sometimes very upset about that. So I think everybody should be on the same page. I'd also like to see protocols for neighborhood notification when massive spills occur. I'm not talking about the 5-gallon bucket kind. I'm talking about the massive ones. I think neighbors should know, and those people with vulnerable health conditions can take precautions. Obviously, I'd like to see local control when siting of CAFOs. I don't think a rural residential zoned area is a good place to do that with 90 families within 2 miles. Obviously, more staff, especially monitoring producers that have a history of violations, especially ones egregious as the one we had in Emerald. So, to wrap it up, because of our experience, my husband and I had some decisions to make. We had some family needs we needed to address, and we needed to decide if we were willing to invest more money in our property there in Emerald. We decided it wasn't worth the risk because of some of the current laws and practices in Wisconsin. We needed a level of certainty that money we put into our home, we'd get back out of it at some point. that I would be able to drink my water. The DNR water quality specialist told me because of the karst region we live in, my water could be contaminated 1 week, the next week it could be clean, the next week it could be contaminated, the next week it could be clean. The water moves through the landscape very quickly. So how would I ever be assured of clean water? How could I have family over for Thanksgiving dinner? And then I have children and elderly people in my family. So we felt we needed to invest in our retirement home outside of the state of Wisconsin, which is very sad because I graduated from school here in Wisconsin. I lived here for 20 years. I didn't want to leave. I love the cream in my coffee every morning, but I need clean drinking water to make that coffee in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Virginia Draft.
My name is Virginia Drath. I live at 1541 County Road O in Road, Wisconsin, St. Croix County, which, by the way, is also on karst topography. Karst and shallow carbonate bedrock goes all the way up into Polk County. It isn't just the southern part of the state or the eastern part of the state. I am a retired farmer and a retired nurse. Today I'm going to talk about the personal impact water quality in our area has affected me. I became more concerned about water and air quality issues when the Emerald Sky Dairy, 1.5 miles from me, planned to expand. Folks in my township were already talking about brown water coming from their faucets and large amounts of manure being spread for days at a time. I started spending some Saturday mornings and some Wednesday evenings at the town dump, handing out information regarding the dairy's plans to expand. Information from the County Extension Office and from Washington, D.C. on how to take care of your private well. I was also able to give out over 175 water test kits that would go to a lab in Colfax. I mentored a high school student who was writing his senior paper on water quality. We were able to visit with 30 to 50 folks at the 8 hours he was there at the town dump with me. He said he learned firsthand how much people were concerned about their water. One older gentleman told us he was told by a CAFO owner that he would rather pay the fine than fix the problem. The past 4 years I have gone to 9 different counties and listened to 12 different hearings. Today is another hearing, so that's 13. Given either by DNR, the county itself, or by a CAFO owner or their engineer planning to expand or build new. I've heard all about the state-of-the-art equipment that won't fail, that they diligently self-monitor. Yet we read 3 to 4 times a year about spills. I've heard them talk about the current regulations as being burdensome, outrageous, and are causing an economic disaster. At all the public hearings, the public comments are about water and air quality, odors, property values, and what's going to happen to their grandchildren if they want to live there. These are the same comments I hear at the dump. Many times I've heard folks say they can't afford to fix their well or buy a water treatment system. So they buy bottled water just to live in their homes. Now to me, that's burdensome, outrageous, and causing an economic hardship. It's clear to me if the current regulations were protecting our water, air, and environment as intended, none of us would have been here today. We all want the same protections. Water should not be a commodity. My faucets say hot and cold. They don't say Democrat or Republican. I'll close with this thought. When you turn on your faucet to brush your teeth tonight, pause for a minute and think about the folks in Emerald Township and in other townships in Wisconsin, in possibly your own township, that can't do that without getting a bottle of water first. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, I can't get the last name from New Richmond.
Hello. I have a bit of a cautionary tale. I live on the west end of, west side of the state, and I am very into the St. Croix River, and that has been a joy for me. So I am very concerned about the St. Croix. The St. Croix River just celebrated its 50th year as a wild and scenic river. Scores of people enjoy this river yearly for its beauty, clean water, and abundant fishery. This beautiful river may now be in jeopardy as an Iowan hog farm, hoping to breed as many as 26,000 hogs, sets its sights on northwestern Wisconsin. Is short-term profit for a huge out-of-state factory farm worth losing this amazing gem which flows between Minnesota and Wisconsin? The St. Croix River brings lots of money in tourist dollars to the small towns along its path. Currently, a temporary moratorium in Burnett County is slowing this farm's pace, but other counties' administrators, including Polk County, are mistakenly viewing this as a family farm and won't allow the moratorium to go forward. Water moves. 26,000 animals. My question is why, when a small community, such as Somerset, Roberts, and many others, when it reaches, say, 1,500 people, do they need a sewer water treatment facility? Should not a farm of 26,000 animals require the same? Why should spreading manure from 26,000 animals on farm fields be considered responsible management today? Good chance E. coli will develop in the St. Croix at some point. Water moves. This practice, like many others, should be considered archaic and should not be a farming practice in 2019. On a personal note, I find it interesting all the rules we needed to follow when constructing the outhouse for our primitive cabin in Ashland County. We could not be in a floodplain. We had to be a significant distance from the Chippewa River. It had to be an enclosed vault to be serviced when full by an authorized septic company. Seems a bit ironic, wouldn't you say? We need to protect our surface water, groundwater, rivers, lakes, streams, and wetlands from big ag before it becomes a huge problem here locally. We need to do it now. Water moves. Thank you.
Joan?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I realize you're all looking rather fatigued. My name is Gloria Adams of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Since becoming a citizen member of the Eau Claire County Land Conservation Committee, the Eau Claire Groundwater Subcommittee, and regularly attending the Eau Claire River Coalition meetings, water has certainly been an increasing concern for me. Water quality is going to, now and in the future, require long-term scientific research, plan development, funding, and legislation. Cleanup after the fact is always much more expensive than preservation. The DNR must be granted the funding required for research and implementation of plans and regulations. That includes funding for scientific personnel. Most water permits in Wisconsin are self-monitored, and the DNR usually does not have the personnel to inspect until there is a crisis. The DNR also requires and will need more autonomy to do its job without the imposition of political bias. Citizens are increasingly working in large lake groups and watersheds, as you've heard, which require on-the-ground support from the DNR. Funding is necessary for all of this. When we have meetings of the Eau Claire Water Coalition, I am always grateful to see a DNR person there. And I realize it's after hours and they're making special arrangements to get there. But they need to be paid too. Wisconsin must provide a sustained baseline funding for county land and water conservation staff, as you've heard before, because they are the ones that have the feet on the ground. They have the technical support that farmers and others require and need. We turn to them. Land conservation personnel are working cooperatively also with citizen groups who are dedicated to improving watersheds, rivers, and lakes. Their role is invaluable. They're the ones that know how to write the grants, and they're the ones that know the laws when we have difficulty with lakes and rivers. Counties simply cannot afford to fund increasing demands on land conservation departments. Those demands really come to the forefront when, in western Wisconsin, we suddenly were faced with all the sand mining issues. They ended up being handled by land conservation, which of course then doesn't have time for the farmers. It's crucial to implement existing agricultural non-point pollution standards, NR 151, as you've heard. That's going to require more funding, again, but the reward is less runoff to carry pollutants into waters. And of course the aim is for 100% coverage of farmland. But truly, I don't think that voluntary efforts are going to do the whole gamut of need. There's going to need to be scientific-based regulation coming through the legislature. The cost analysis of such legislation for water needs to include the cost not just to business, but the cost for not implementing whatever is needed to protect water. Lastly, groundwater monitoring must be expanded by both well owners and researchers. There also needs to be more testing, as you've heard. We've encountered those needs in the groundwater advisory in Eau Claire. There's various formats for information. Trying to pull all of that together is cumbersome, to say the least, and then there's more needed. I also want to mention septage. And in my case, I wanted to mention, living in town now, septage that is taken from our treatment plant and spread on farmland. Seems to me Eau Claire County spreads something in the vicinity of 44,000 acres of septage. But septage is not coming out of treatment plants tested for all the chemicals and the possibilities that it contains. Farmers make assumptions that septage is good on the soil, but they don't know if it contains PFAS or anything else that it's not being tested for. At this time too, if you haven't already, I would encourage you all to read the DNR draft of Wisconsin's Non-Point Source Program Management Program for the years 2021 to 2025. I'll tell you about my sister Diane. She's my little sister. She lives in Taylor County. She will not get her well tested. It's going to cost her too much. She will not change her septic. She doesn't have the money. I can go into why she doesn't have the money, despite the fact that she's a draftsperson, makes a decent salary. But every time her husband has to have surgery, she has to take out a loan to pay for the medical expenses. And so really water and the ability for homeowners to deal with water, it's encumbered by all sorts of other issues too. It's nice to say, oh yeah, you need to test your water, but when you have to get loans for other things, it can't be done. Thank you.
you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for traveling up here and spending so much time with us today. I appreciate the visits upstate as well as like tomorrow, and I think you're going to Ashland, and the livestock sighting hearing will be in Spooner. It really saves us trips to Madison. And I appreciate the posting of the resource materials on your website, because it allowed me to go back and see what other organizations have already informed you, so I'm not repeating it. I want to speak to you from my experiences personally and as a plan commissioner in the town of Edgewater in Sawyer County, and a 3-term village trustee in the village of Birchwood in Washburn County. I live on Big Birch Lake, which is in Birchwood, and I have a 4th generation small family farm on Lake Chautauqua in Edgewater. Those are the headwaters of the Red Cedar Basin that you've been hearing about today. I'm sorry that some of our representatives aren't here who asked questions earlier. The headwaters, this was a logging area, and things were logged off in the 1800s. Rivers were impounded with dams to float logs down here, and subsequent to logging the area, there were slash fires. All of this has left legacy sediment in our lakes. So Lake Chautauqua, when somebody said Henry Schoolcraft mapped these lakes or rivers and they were all clear, no, what became Lake Chautauqua was putrid, and he has that in his notes. When my great-grandparents settled there and built resorts in the late 1800s, that picture you saw of that green cottage cheese, that's what that lake was like then. The old-timers said that herons could walk across the top of the lake. You also heard from a gentleman today that talked about the phosphorus that we have in our groundwater. People up by us, we have retired scientists, they measure groundwater that comes in with higher phosphorus than we have in the lakes. The lake's actually diluting it. So in testifying about in TMDL hearings, a lot of these things haven't been taken into account. So there is definitely value in asking farmers to do the right thing and have practices that reduce contributions. However, we have natural sources either in legacy sediments or coming in from groundwater that haven't been included in the conversation. I think one of the other earlier questions was to one of the former speakers, would they recommend going back and reversing the changes to shoreland zoning? I think that is also important for water quality, because when you talk about having private wells and septics on every 100 feet of shoreline and on 20,000 square feet of land, you will be drinking your neighbor's septic. So I kind of get a kick out of being an initial board member for the Lake Association by us, that people are concerned with the green water we have, but yet they don't think about, because they got a good deal on this green lake and they have all their shallow wells and septics together, they don't even think about the groundwater that they're drinking. Serving as a trustee on the village of Birchwood, I experienced 2 things. One was trying to protect our lone municipal well. We do not have a water treatment facility, and our municipal well sits on the edge of the village of Birchwood in Washburn County, and we're under our own zoning. And it's right on the edge of the town of Edgewater in Sawyer County. I think people have made comments that obviously water does not know political boundaries. So even though the village of Birchwood had worked with the Wisconsin Rural Water Association to develop a wellhead protection plan and an ordinance, the neighboring county, Sawyer County, will not recognize that. And also in the a wellhead protection plan developed by the Rural Water Association, it shows that the groundwater flow that our water comes from is coming from the north. It is coming from Sawyer County. And they are citing commercial developments on private well and septic, a recreational vehicle sales and repair service that not only has septic, but then they also have the byproducts of engine repair and storing vehicles. We did not prevail in appealing the decision to allow them to cite that there with the Board of Appeals, and the village did not have the money to take that to court. So what I've learned through that process is state statutes say that if we need to build a second municipal well, when we go to cite that second municipal well, we have to be set back from existing land uses. We can't interfere with the private enjoyment of someone else's land. But the state statutes don't say that development that puts our well at risk can't encroach on our well. So even though we have an ordinance, because the neighboring county won't recognize it, it's not enforceable. So I would ask for a change in state statute to help protect municipal wells. That if a new municipal well cannot be built with encroaching on someone's private land, then if there is an existing municipal well and these uses are going to put our wells at risk, that statutes will prevent that and prevent us from having to take matters like this to court. We also, as a small community, benefited from funds that allowed us to rebuild our waste treatment facility. And so we greatly appreciate the continued support, because a small rural community would never be able to build a waste treatment facility, and we discharge to groundwater. So that is important for those people downstream from us. So I also agree with many of the things that some of these organizations, like the Land and Water Association, Wisconsin Rural Water, had in their recommendations, but I did notice that there were some things missing, and this protection of municipal wells was largely, probably the biggest fight that I've ever had to deal with. And thank you to everyone who testified today. I probably learned more about my watershed today than the 8 years of attending the Red Cedar Conference, and kudos to those people in Dunn County who are in the forefront and set the example for the rest of us. So thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Chase Cummings. I'm the County Conservationist with the Pepin County Land and Water Conservation Department. We are responsive to all citizens' concerns, challenges, and successes. We make it a priority to build relationships and understand perspectives, especially of our citizens that have well water contamination and our citizen farmers that manage our lands. While Pepin County is small, we have very diverse challenges, and conservation workload is high. We have many conservation-minded farmers and landowners that want to do the right thing. They are requesting local resources to do that. The majority of our main stem streams in Pepin County are listed in the impaired waters list for total phosphorus. We have a continued private well monitoring program that last year in one township, over 45% of the wells tested were above the safe drinking water standard for nitrate. We as a community are taking a systems approach to build a local capacity within the community. Agriculture is our largest land use, and our farmers are stepping up to do the right thing and stepping up to do their part. We are assisting them to implement conservation practices, including but not limited to nitrogen use efficiency project through Discovery Farms, nitrogen fixing and nitrogen efficient corn hybrid trials, composting of liquid manure, continuous improvement to implement nutrient management plans, and improving soil health. Our farmers and community members are coming to us for help and guidance. I feel proud that we have built trust with many of our farmers. When we consider the root causes of our water quality problems, it appears our farmers are at the mercy of the global commodity market. Our dairy farmers are forced to sell their herds and grow corn and soybeans. I believe that trends in our water quality are related to the changes in our land use. Recognizing the role our global market plays on our system and the policies, in many cases it is beyond our local capacity to control those forces. Supporting local decision-making and local resource needs is important to solving local issues. Supporting our landowners' requests and needs by, at a minimum, fully funding our land and water resource management grant programs for staff, local staff and support is a start. Policies that reevaluate all sources of nitrogen are also needed. Specifically, nitrogen recommendations based on environmental standards as an option or alternative to the current economic standards. Consider funding sources for these programs and many others through a Wisconsin Legacy Fund. The challenges associated with passing such a law may be vast, but I encourage you to seriously consider it. I thank you for your time and service to these important water quality issues that affect every aspect of our state's economy, and for your current and future support of locally led conservation.
Thank you. Lynn Hughesborn, Westmore. And after Lynn's Pamela.
Sorry for my handwriting there. My name is Liz Osborne, and I represent the Tanner Menomonie Lake Improvement Association as its president. Our organization participates in many collaborative partnerships with various groups and individuals, some of whom you've heard from already. This is because water is a unifier. It united all of us here today. However, conceptually and legislatively, we separate water resources into groundwater and surface water. We know these systems interact, and it has become apparent we need to address their management holistically. TMLIA has embraced this paradigm shift, and it looks beyond the shoreline of our lakes to the surrounding watershed, including the water beneath the land. We appreciate the task force embracing a discussion on water as a whole, as groundwater and surface water are one resource. The movement of water between the systems means nutrients and chemicals are transferred, and for better or worse, actions on one system impacts the other. The state does have established yet separate rules for groundwater and surface water. Nevertheless, having even the best ideas on the books won't solve anything without sufficient staff positions at every level to administer them. The ineffective enforcement of existing regulations is less an example of bureaucratic inefficiency and more an indicator of the severity and complexity of the problem. Non-point pollution now accounts for 75% of our water quality impairments. However, the task of addressing non-point source pollution is practically, politically, and economically daunting. It is difficult to hold everyone across all socioeconomic classes accountable for their various contributions to pollution. We expect that remedying our collective past indiscretions will carry a cost for all of us to bear, leading to the temptation to seek out cheap and quick but temporary solutions that are ultimately not sustainable financially or environmentally. On the other hand, the cost of inaction will be even higher, and our legacy nothing more than passing the bill on to generations yet to come. Our community's dedication to pursuing action can be illustrated by the number of attendees at today's event, and hopefully that engagement will be reciprocated by our elected officials. The technical issues of managing our water resources is undeniably complex, but the more challenging problem will likely prove to be political. Therefore, we appreciate the tough decisions you will need to make in order to realize our shared goals. But don't put this burden solely on the state. Reinstating local control allows citizens and their local governments who have a closer understanding of the issues they face the freedom to determine appropriate ordinances for their circumstances, and prevents the often arbitrary designations made when averaging for broad statewide standards. Please do not have wasted the many hours you've spent at these public hearings throughout the state, nor the sacrifice and commitment by the citizens who gave comment. Listen to the people that gave up an entire afternoon and now early evenings, paycheck, or spending time with their families. This topic is that important to us. We are telling you how to be good stewards of our tax dollars. Please invest them in water quality. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Marr. Dr. Pamela